I got to tell you, I'll tell you.
I almost smiled there.
you almost lost your image. Here's a guy I admire greatly in news. Between he and Bill Wanda, two of the greatest news guys I've ever worked with in my life. But, you know, there's always a story to go. You and I are friends long enough. We would occasionally go out and enjoy a friendly libation together. And yet some stories went around this town, as you know, and you're a legend in this town.
I know what you're driving at, Russell, and the story followed me to New York. It has followed me everywhere I have gone. And that
He's mad when he calls me Russell.
I was so sloshed on the air that I fell off the stool. It's not true. It broke. But one of my most memorable stories, broadcasting from Channel 7 here, ABC in its wisdom decided on a Christmas Eve to broadcast first from St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, transfer to the cathedral in Chicago, and then end up here in San Francisco. Two problems. One, we didn't have a cathedral. It had burned down, but the Catholic diocese did have another church. We used that. The second problem, the stage manager. The cardinal is behind me. There's an altar light table. Cardinal is dressed in his gowns. He's holding a metal box, and the smoke of the incense is wafting heavenward. I'm supposed to make an expository statement. The camera pushes by me, and we go on. In my earphone, I hear from Chicago, 10 seconds. The stage manager leans over to me and says, "His gown is gorgeous, but his purse is on fire." That was back in the days when... That was back in the days when they were in the minority. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you said it. We'll forgive you. Let's hear it for a guy that not only was #1 in San Francisco, became #1 in New York for years, and he held reign there for a long, long time. Roger Grimsby.
Well, the early day reporters had a very macho image. At least that's how they saw themselves, and television news wasn't yet a woman's world until well into the 1950s.
The woman behind.
Back in the 1950s, many of the important interview shows and almost all the public affairs programs for Channel 7 were done by an amazing woman named Wanda Ramey. In 1957, she left us for Channel 5, where she became the very first woman to anchor a San Francisco television newscast.
Today on the Noon News.
Here she is, Wanda Ramey. Wanda Ramey. When I was just working at Channel 5 years ago doing a children's show, you and John Weston were doing the news.
Yes, we sure were.
And a very successful team, probably the most of all at that time. What was it like for a woman starting out in work?
Well, you know, it was great because in the beginning, and I was...
It is live television. Wait, just ignore it.
Television.
It is live television.
This is live television.
That's right. Give young folks a thrill. This is what it's really like.
I thought maybe they were commenting editorially.
Not yet, anyway.
Like that.
Yeah.
No, it was great. And I think I was there at the right time. And the world was ready, or certainly the Bay Area was ready, and all of us were ready for a woman to do the news. And I did, and I loved it, and I'm glad I did.
Well, I understand that in those days that you used certain kind of props and things. Like, for example, there was a story I heard about using ice.
Oh, yes. Well, you know, there weren't very many. We had very little film. We used all live stuff in the studio. We had an interview with a man who was going to be climbing one of the mountains in India, and it was going to be icy up there. So we got great big, huge blocks of ice and let him show how he was going to carve his way up that mountain. It was Dr. Will Syriac.
It's a kind of prop that doesn't last a long time. I just only have that for about a week, and it's gone after all that stuff.
Right.
Let's have a nice. Let's hear for Wanda Ramey, who has been in this business a long time. Is a terrific person. Thank you, Wanda.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's a delight to have you here. Very, very much. Okay. Thank you, Wanda Ramey.
Thank you, great. Well, for a number of years, 8 years actually, I was general manager at KGO-TV, and in that position, one of my responsibilities that I hated was to broadcast a weekly editorial.
Don't believe it.
That's the one thing I really liked about being a station manager, yeah. But then I wasn't the first one who had to step out on editorial. This is the guy that made it tough for everybody else because he wanted to do it and every manager had. Here he is, the former general manager, vice president, David M. Sachs. David. That's kind of fancy. Guy brings his own stool. David, how are you?
Since I owned everything in the building, I couldn't bring my own stool.
Well, we'll put that now. But you were one of the first guys to go on and do editorials, right?
Yes, and there was a serious side to being the first station to editorialize in the country, and I think it's important that it's stated now. We had the problem in this city politically with the fact that the Chronicle was the most important political entity here, and the object that we had was to neutralize their political strength in order that we could build that tall tower that now everybody sees up there on Twin Peaks. And so having seen Phil Lasky, one of our great broadcasters over at Channel 5, try some editorials to see if they'd work, we decided, with the help of our New York brass, that we would neutralize the Chronicle's problems of political strength by editorializing daily. We did, and then everybody in the country picked it up, and now the tower is there.
And the tower's there. We call it Sachs's Monument. Let's hear it for David M. Sachs.
Coming up, we're going to the thrill of victory, the agony of editorials, and some sportscasters remembered.
And some of the most memorable events in the history of the Bay Area, as was covered by television during these 40 magic years.
Happy 40th anniversary, Channel 7, from all of us at 2020.
The Examiner proclaims San Francisco dons long pants in the field of television tomorrow. The event marking its attainment of young manhood in the opening broadcast of KGO-TV, the American Broadcasting Company's video station.
I became a man, but I want you to hear
It's about
this.
time.
Here's the really purple prose. The images that dazzle the tower on Sutro Heights.
Not Barry Fitzgerald again. In 1948, the American Broadcasting Company bought the mansion and the property for, are you ready, $125,000. Harry Jacobs, now retired, was named Director of Engineering. It was his job to put KGO-TV on the air.
I had the honor of receiving the first piece of gear for that tower. Now, you see, the tower consists of a lot of pieces of steel and a big foundation that we had to put in. And then there's lighting equipment and all that stuff. So the first thing that shows up for this whole project is a package about 4 feet long and about a foot square. It's the beacon light for the top of the tower. That we need, you know.
Oh, we ain't got a barrel of money.
Nobody knew anything about television except what we'd read in a few books. And so it was a novelty. And every day you came to work, it was fun. Because something new was happening every day, and you never knew what in the world was going to happen. Everything went on the air cold, and nothing was rehearsed. And it was really a great experience in living every day in that business.
Yeah, it's true. We were the only station that was broadcasting from a mansion. But hey, poor old KPIX was jammed up into an attic somewhere up on the top of the mark. And when KRN came along just a few months later, they shoved them into a corner of the old Chronicle building.
Yeah, but for all the grandeur of our surroundings, the ABC network's offerings were pretty thin.
Thin.
Thin, tiny thin. Yeah.
There was a simple reason. Our major prime time performers were wrestlers and boxers and roller skating gladiators. Sports coverage was cheap in those days, and the fledgling ABC television network was poor. Of course, there were no satellites, microwave links, and transcontinental cable, so the network sports we got on the West Coast were on film. And they came in the mail a couple of days after the bout or the game was over.
So we broadcast a lot of local sports. The very first night on the air, Channel 7 piled a couple of cameras into the station's one remote truck and went to Emeryville to cover the season opener between the Oakland Oaks and the San Francisco Seals. Oh, by the way, Lefty O'Doul Seals were beaten by the Oaks 2-0.
We covered all the Oaks home games, and every fall and winter we spent a lot of time at Kezar Stadium and in Berkeley and Palo Alto. San Francisco State, USF, UC, St. Mary's, Stanford, and the University of Santa Clara. We covered them all.
But as the years went on and the technology improved, ABC found it had earned a valuable reputation as the network for sports. At the time, I listened to 49er games when Bob Fouts coined those games. A lot of people knew and cared nothing about sports, however, became rabid fans just by watching television because perhaps of that sense that something unexpected could happen at any moment. This is the essence of live television.
This is more the story of those who do not rage against the dying of the light, and why.
There's another kind of real-life drama that makes very powerful television, the documentary program.
How about some peace to walk the streets towards the end of it? My God almighty, in America, is that asking too much?